The radio picked up a call from a frequency that doesn't exist anymore, and for about 10 seconds I thought somebody in dispatch was screwing with me. I was halfway through my evening patrol in the northern section of the park, parked near an old service gate that had been welded shut in the 90s, finishing the last of a stale gas station coffee while I logged mileage in the route book, when my handheld cracked alive with a burst of static so loud it made me jump. Then a man's voice came through, thin, panicked, cutting in and out, saying, "Unit 12, copy. Need assistance. 2 hikers off trail. Black Ridge access. Male injured." And then just white noise. The weird part wasn't the call itself. We get panicked hikers all the time. The weird part was the channel. It was coming through on frequency 154.57, which used to belong to park operations before the repeater system was upgraded 6 years earlier. That channel had been decommissioned. It wasn't even programmed into current radios anymore. Mine only still had it because I'd inherited an older handheld from a retiring ranger and never bothered removing the dead channels. At first I thought maybe some ham operator nearby was bleeding into the band, or another agency was cross-talking. Weird overlap happens in the mountains. But then dispatch called me on primary and asked why I hadn't acknowledged the emergency traffic. I told them what I heard. There was a pause, just long enough to make me sit up straighter. Then dispatch said they hadn't transmitted anything. No units were on Black Ridge, and no distress calls had come in. I'm not exactly sure why that bothered me as much as it did. Maybe because whoever was on that dead frequency had used our call sign format correctly. Maybe because they'd said Black Ridge access, which isn't on any public map anymore since that trail was unofficially closed after a washout in 2018. Most visitors didn't even know it existed. Dispatch asked me to check it anyway, just in case some hikers had found the old route online or followed one of those stupid all-trail shortcuts people post. Incidents like this happen more often than people think. People see a dotted line on an outdated map and assume it's still maintained. So I headed that way. Black Ridge access was about 12 minutes from my position, up a maintenance road no public vehicle should have been on after dark. The gate at the entrance was chained and locked like always, but when my headlights swept over it, I saw fresh mud splashed across the lower bars and tire marks leading around the side where the burn dips. Somebody had driven around it. That immediately changed the tone of the call for me. I notified dispatch, gave my location marker, and drove another quarter mile until the road narrowed into old gravel and brush. And one more scent. Listen to the world of the dead. Wall and Night on the best of the show. About 50 yards from the washed-out trailhead, I found the vehicle. A silver Subaru Outback, engine cold, parked crooked in the turnaround, with the driver's door hanging open and one rear tire sunk into the ditch. No plates on the front, common enough, but the rear plate was half covered in mud. There was a hiking permit on the dash from that morning. 2 names, Dylan Mercer and Leah Ortiz, both mid-20s, local address. I remember that because I repeated it into the radio while I swept my flashlight through the car. Their backpacks weren't inside. Neither were their phones, which suggested they'd taken them. One thing that did stand out was a folded park brochure on the passenger seat with the current marked trails highlighted in yellow, and then an old photocopied topo map underneath it, and marked in red pen, with Black Ridge circled and the word shortcut written beside it. So yeah, they'd gone off trail on purpose. I grabbed my field bag, switched to my headlamp, and started up the old access path. It wasn't really a trail anymore, more like a scar through the trees where the original route used to be before the slope collapsed. You could still follow sections of it if you knew what to look for. Old blazes, rusted cable anchors, drainage cuts. About 5 minutes in, I found the first sign they'd passed through, fresh shoe prints in the mud, 2 distinct tread patterns, both heading uphill. Then one set doubled back a few feet and turned sideways near a drop-off where the earth had slumped, like somebody had almost slipped. I radioed the tracks in and kept moving. It was getting darker fast under the canopy, and the fog had started settling low the way it does in the ravines there. My radio kept hissing intermittently, not unusual in that area because the ridge blocked signal, but twice I heard clipped fragments on the dead frequency again. Same voice. Unit 12. Respond. Then another voice in the background. A woman crying, maybe. I stopped and checked my radio display. Still on primary. The old frequency wasn't selected. That messed with me more than I'd like to admit. I switched the radio off completely for maybe 5 seconds, then back on. Static gone. I kept moving. Around marker post B14, which was ridiculous, because those posts hadn't been maintained in years and were mostly rotted stumps. I heard shouting ahead. Real shouting this time, not radio noise. I ran the last stretch and found the woman first. Leah, I assumed. She came stumbling out of the brush with one side of her face streaked in dirt, eyes huge, almost knocked me over grabbing my vest. She kept saying, he fell, there's somebody down there, there's somebody else down there. And at first I thought she meant Dylan. She was hyperventilating so badly I had to physically steady her and get her to point. She led me maybe 20 yards off the old trail to a washed-out section of slope where the ground had dropped into a narrow gully full of broken shale and deadfall. Dylan was at the bottom, conscious, but barely, pinned awkwardly under a snapped branch, with his left leg bent in a direction legs don't bend. Compound fracture, a bad one. Blood through the pant leg. He was pale and shaking, but awake enough to answer questions. I called in medevac, though I already knew air extraction at night and that terrain was unlikely. Then Leah grabbed my arm and pointed farther into the gully. Tell him, she said to Dylan. Tell him what we saw. Dylan looked up at me and said, through clenched teeth, there was another guy down here. I asked where. He pointed downhill into the dark drainage channel. He had a radio. He kept yelling into it. Then, when she went for help, he just left. I asked what the guy looked like. Dylan said maybe 40s, ranger uniform or something close to it. Couldn't tell in the dark. He thought the man had heard them fall and come down from somewhere lower on the ridge. I asked if he'd spoken to him. Dylan nodded. Said the man had crouched beside him, looked at his leg, and told him help was coming. Then he stood up, walked down the drainage, and disappeared. No flashlight, no sound. That made no sense. We had no other units in that sector. I checked with dispatch while applying a tourniquet above Dylan's knee. No one else had been sent. No volunteers. No SAR yet. Just me. Leah kept insisting the man had been using an old brick-style handheld radio with a long antenna like from a movie, and she said his jacket patch looked wrong somehow, like older. I figured stress and darkness were distorting details. People in panic remember weird things. But then while I was splinting Dylan's leg, my radio burst with static again, and that same dead channel voice came through clear as day from my shoulder mic. Unit 12, subject located in ravine. Leg fracture, female stable, hurry up. Every hair on my arm stood up. Leah heard it too because she jerked backward and said, "That's him." Dispatch immediately asked what the hell that transmission was because they'd heard part of it bleed through. I told them I didn't know. I still don't. We got Dylan stabilized enough to move once the SAR team arrived. Took nearly 40 minutes because of the terrain. And while we were packaging him onto the litter, I did a quick sweep downhill into the drainage where Dylan said the man had gone. About 30 yards below the accident site, half buried in the mud beside an uprooted cedar, I found an old portable radio, not modern, one of the heavy analog Murado bricks Parks used in the early 2000s. Cracked housing, antenna snapped halfway. Battery compartment rusted open. It looked like it had been outside for years. There was no way it had transmitted anything. I remember just staring at it in my light while water dripped off the branches, because suddenly I knew why that dead frequency sounded familiar. Not the channel itself, the voice. I'd heard it before on old training recordings. Search and rescue archive tapes they use for rookies. One of our former rangers, a guy named Mark Ellison, who disappeared during a storm response in 2009, somewhere near Black Ridge, after trying to reach 2 lost hikers. They never found him. I'm not saying it was his voice. I'm saying it sounded enough like it that I stood there in the dark with this broken radio in my hand and felt cold, in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. I didn't mention that to anyone at the time. It sounded insane, and there had to be a rational explanation. Cross-frequency interference. Somebody playing a prank. Old archived audio somehow rebroadcast. I don't know. But here's the part that still gets me. Back at the station, after Dylan was transported and Leah gave her statement, I pulled the archived incident file on Ellison out of curiosity. Same area, same unofficial shortcut, same slope failure. The hikers he'd gone after in 2009 had ignored closures and taken Black Ridge to save time. Their report, typed by hand because it was that long ago, said they'd last heard Ranger Ellison over the radio say, "Subject located in ravine, male injured, female stable. Hurry up." Word for word. Exact wording. Same transmission I heard that night. Same one dispatch partially recorded from my radio. They let me listen to the recording afterward, because nobody could explain where it originated. The timestamp on dispatch's digital log showed the transmission had entered the system at 21:14, but my body cam metadata, my route sheet, and the SAR arrival logs all put me at the ravine no earlier than 21:26 minutes later. 12 minutes later. Somehow dispatch logged a transmission from my location before I had even reached it. They chalked it up to software sync error and radio interference. Officially, that's all it was. Dylan recovered. Leah never hiked off trail again, according to her. The Subaru was towed the next morning. We reinforced the closure gate with concrete barriers after that and scrubbed old route references from every map database we could find. But I still avoid that section on solo patrol if I can help it. 'Cause every once in a while, usually when weather rolls in and the repeaters start acting strange, I'll hear a burst of static on my radio from a channel that shouldn't be there anymore. Just for a second. Just enough to make me check the display and tell myself I imagined it. And last fall, during inventory, Nate Mintz found that old analog brick radio again in the cloud mag evidence locker where I'd logged it. Except the battery compartment was empty, and there was wet mud packed into the speaker grill, fresh enough that it hadn't been there the week before. They asked if I'd signed it out for training. I hadn't. So now when rookies ask why Black Ridge is permanently closed, I tell them the official version, that the slope is unstable, the old trail isn't safe, and shortcuts in the woods get people killed, which is true. But I don't tell them the part I keep thinking about whenever my radio hisses after dark. I don't tell them that if the timestamp on that transmission was right, then someone reported those hikers injured in that ravine 12 minutes before they actually fell,